The chapter begins with the fact that two very beautiful girls on the bed were reaching out to the protagonist. The girl from the Jade Clan Zhao Techui only mentioned the name of the protagonist, and Jade Clan's assistant Lu Xiaoning said she couldn't wait any longer. The protagonist, pulling off his clothes, asked not to hurry because everyone has things to do. He is the gatekeeper of the Jade Clan, and the protagonist's name is Shang Lan. Immediately, a certain girl made a hole in the wall and shouted that it was an outrage, and Shang Lan was scared. This was the empress of the Xuaniao Jade Clan. She called them dogs, men and women. Xuaniao asked how he dared to take advantage of her absence. The protagonist smiled and said that now she was here and they would be together. Techui and Xiaoning hugged the protagonist and he told them to ask the empress to try out the weapon. Shang Lan grabbed Empress Xuaniao's hand and she was very embarrassed and asked to let her go. She's the empress. The protagonist heard some sounds and did not understand what those sounds were and noted that it became very noisy. The girls were very excited and Xiaoning asked Shang Lan to hurry up. After that, we are shown the room of the gatekeeper of the Jade Clan and it turns out that the protagonist was asleep all this time. Someone was knocking on the door and shouting for the protagonist to open the door. Immediately, the protagonist woke up and was told to get up. After that, we are shown the gates of the Jade Clan. There were girls standing near them and one asked why the gates were closed during the day. They were always open before. Another thought that they were no longer letting students in. The brunette asked how this could happen. The Jade Clan is the only female clan among the 6 clans in Huangju. All the female nuns here are proficient in martial arts. Besides, they are young and each of them is submissive to their country. Her friend asked if there were any smelly men who would bother. Her friend replied by asking how this could happen. The Jade Clan hates men the most, and within a radius of 100 kilometers, there is not a single male. The protagonist Sleepy opened the doors and asked if something was wrong. The 2 girls were just stunned when they saw the protagonist, and he was surprised by their reaction. Immediately, 2 girls were scared of the man and started running away screaming, and the protagonist panicked a little. His name is Zhang Liang. He is a man who works as a gate guard for the Jade Clan at the foot of the mountain. It may seem strange to somehow a clan consisting exclusively of women has a male guardian. It all started 3 days ago. He was taking a bath at home and suddenly felt that the bottom of the tub was cracking. And through the portal I got into a new world and flew down. He fell onto the stone statue of the Jade Clan ancestor worship ceremony, which shocked all the girls and the empress. At that moment, he thought he was going to be killed and a lot of swords were put to his face. The empress told him not to kill him and to send him to guard the gate at the foot of the mountain. That's how he came here and became a gate guard. He didn't have any skills, so he had to hide here for a while. But this empress is really very good. If only he could tell her that he liked her. Immediately, his heart ached and he did not understand why he was burning all over and what was the matter. The protagonist was in great pain and had severe shortness of breath. The activation of the heart awakening system immediately began. The reading of the information about the Lord is completed. A god-level entry system. The protagonist was in the mind of a deity. Zhang Lan was in the form of a corporeal spirit and did not understand what kind of place this was. The system informed him that he had activated the god-level system, and now he was given the number 1 login task. Task category. Specify the designated for logging in. Required time, until midnight today. Task content. Get to the Empress's bedchamber to complete the login. Completion reward, unknown. The penalty for failure is death. The protagonist was very scared and asked the system if she was joking, because he needed to go to the Empress's palace in the dead of night. Before he gets within 800 meters, he will be chopped into minced meat. Visiting at 3 a.m., he asked if the system said it wasn't suicide. The system replied to shut up. He has no right to resist with the tasks issued by the system. The protagonist immediately flew down screaming. The system finally added that if he did not complete the task of the system, then he was finished. He immediately plopped down on the floor in his room. The protagonist began to cry and did not understand what kind of mockery it was. After that, evening came and we were shown the Jade Clan. Outside the main palace, the protagonist changed into a ninja costume and thought that instead of subjecting himself to a painful death, it was better to try to complete the task. The reward for completing the task should be something that will save his life. He ran past the columns and thought that if he was seen, he would be beaten to death. He prayed to God that everything would go well. The protagonist ran up to the Empress's palace and stood there for about 10 minutes. Shang Lan didn't know if the system was joking with him. He is already there, but she does not answer him, so he was very surprised. Immediately, the system told him to go to the bedroom, which made the protagonist very surprised. Zhang carefully opened the door of the palace. At this time, the Empress was immersed in meditation. The protagonist noted that it was bad, because the Empress was still awake. Xuaniao did not understand who it was. He wanders outside her bedchamber and dares to break in. If she hadn't been able to stop at the crucial moment of her dive, she would have finished him off. The protagonist carefully began to penetrate inside and wanted the empress not to look at him. Immediately, he stepped on the floor of the palace and a glow appeared under it. A huge yellow ray appeared in a small explosion. The girls were surprised and turning around. Techui noticed that this sound was in the direction of the palace. Immediately, the empress opened her eyes and was surprised. She saw in front of her a huge yellow ray, inside of which was the protagonist. The system congratulated the protagonist for logging in. His reward is 1. His body becomes divine with an impenetrable heart. The second reward, a pair of high-speed boots. Immediately, the beam stopped and got a little tired, and therefore he had shortness of breath. The empress rushed at him and shouted who it was. The girl raised her foot to hit the guy. The protagonist was very embarrassed that his mouth was already watering, because he saw the empress's hole and said that when he looks into the abyss also looks at him. Immediately, the system reported that the heart engine was activated. The divine body is charged at 40%. The protagonist felt the force. He could feel the endless power creeping out of his body. The girl hit the protagonist, but he grabbed her leg, which surprised the girl. The empress was surprised that he took her mega punch with one hand and did not understand who he was. The protagonist turned around and saw that the empress's subordinates were approaching the palace. The protagonist ran away and began to run away, and with a simple movement he jumped up and ran away. The empress was in great pain. He interrupted her dive and she strikes back. Shouting asked Xuanyao if she was okay, but she didn't understand where he was. The empress shouted for him to close the gate quickly. He must not be allowed to leave the Jade clan. She didn't understand who he was. Other girls came after that. The empress sat down in her seat and shouting asked Techui if she was responsible for protecting the clan. Techui replied that she had made a mistake, because she did not expect that there would be traitors in the clan who would attack the palace at night. Shouting replied that this was not a disciple of the clan. She felt it. It still smells like a stinky man in here. All the girls were very surprised by this information. After that, they started looking for him and could not find him anywhere, and the protagonist ran away from the palace as fast as he could. The girl heard that someone was running and they wanted to check there, but the protagonist stopped. The protagonist immediately jumped out the window, and the girls noted that there was no way to catch him. Shang Lan got into a building where there was a lot of steam and was at a loss. He noted that this place suits him, and he was delighted. He was walking cautiously and saw the girls who were bathing and was very embarrassed. The protagonist realized that he was in a raspberry patch. He couldn't hold back anymore, and behind him, the girl saw a guy. Immediately, the girl became confused and screamed violently. The girls did not understand who he was and how the man got here. The girls wanted to catch him and shouted for him to stop where he was. They also had to be careful. You can't let him touch them. The protagonist ran out of the building in shock with a towel on his head. Now, when I came down from the palace, I told the girls that it could only be that smelly guy. They should go and arrest Shang Lan. If he dared to resist, they would grind him to powder. They were already on their way to the clan gate. Immediately, the girl saw the smoke and asked what it was, and the current was surprised. The system said that the divine body with an impenetrable heart is charged at 130%. It was very dangerous and I had to run away. The protagonist believed that his body was about to explode. Techui ran after him and shouted that he was a pervert and asked where he was running to. She ran after him with her hammer, and the protagonist thought he was recognized. Immediately, the gate was opened by the disciples of the Black Dagger clan, who came to deliver the letter. They didn't understand what was going on here. The chief among them told his friends to let him in first, and then throw daggers. The protagonist saw the daggers that flew at him and was surprised. He immediately got angry and noted that it was time to run. Zhang released some energy into them and asked them not to interfere with him, and the beam even destroyed the earth a little. After that, the next day came, noon. The protagonist was tied up and called a rebel. He was in the main hall of the Jade clan. Techui asked him if he knew what crime he had committed last night. The protagonist made innocent eyes and asked why he was here, because he did not remember what happened. Techui asked why he was pretending to be a fool. He also pretends to be a beginner, although in practice his skills are excellent. At least, this is the 6th level of practical perfection. Shawning was surprised and noted that this was impossible, flowing only at the peak of practical perfection. Techui shouted that she had witnesses. She asked if they had been beaten by this man, who is the gate guard. The guys replied with one voice that they couldn't do anything, and the girls called them weaklings and nobodies. The guy said that they did not remember. They decided to firmly defend the masculinity of the Black Dagger clan because it was impossible to admit it. The first girl asked if they had not been blown to pieces and that they had misunderstood them. The other girls felt that otherwise the Black Dagger students would be completely worthless. Techui was surprised that they did not remember, and the protagonist decided to act and said that he seemed to remember. He said that she beat them up, and then accused him. He did not realize that she was so malicious. Techui was surprised by his words. Immediately, these three remembered and said that it was her. 3 disciples of their Black Dagger clan were beaten by her. If it was the hand of Zhao Techui, the head gate guard of the Jade clan known as the Grumpy Witch, it would be quite reasonable. They accused her, and the girl was even more surprised. Shouting asked the empress about her decision. Xuaniao said that if someone invades the clan, they deserve to die, so it is necessary to act. The guy was scared and said that they were ordered to hand over 6 orders. Immediately, the 3 flew out of the palace and they shouted that the empress would regret it. Shang Lan stood up and said that if everything was okay, then he would return to the gate. Shang told him to wait, she would check everything first. After a moment, she said that Shang Lan really didn't have any strength, let alone practical perfection, didn't even have the fortitude. Techui was surprised, and Lan smiled contentedly. Shang said she was the only one who saw it and asked if she saw someone come through the gate and beat everyone up in one fell swoop. Techui was angry and shouted that he really did it. She grabbed him by the neck and started strangling him, saying that he was bullying her and then she would beat him until he told the truth. The protagonist asked her what she was doing. The girl leaned her melons against his face and squeezed his neck. This feeling returns again. His divine body begins to recharge. The load level is 50%. The girl sat on his shoulders and clutched his head with her legs and shouted at him not to move, and his body was charged at 70%. The protagonist got very excited and realized that he could no longer hold back. The empress stood up and said to stop and that they would talk about it later. Techui was embarrassed and let go of the protagonist, and he coughed violently. Immediately, the protagonist found himself back in the consciousness of the deity. He was informed that he would now receive the second and third tasks. The protagonist was surprised. The second task, specify the designated for logging in. Required time, 72 hours. Task content, get to the peak of Mount Wanman to complete the login. Completion reward, unknown. The penalty for failure is death. The third task, specify the designated for logging in. Required time, 72 hours. The content of the task, to force a woman to wear the specified item. The reward for completion is unknown, and the penalty for failure is death. The protagonist did not understand what kind of object it was. He thought it was a necklace or bracelet. The deity gave him beautiful women's tights and said that this was it, and the protagonist was very confused, but he was glad. After that, they were in the bedchamber of the empress's palace. Shouting turned to the empress and said that Techui would not lie, and therefore she felt that something was wrong with this Shang Lan. Besides, he's a man. She didn't understand why she insisted on stopping him. Xuaniao told her to go downstairs because she wanted to get some rest, and she agreed. The empress thought that the strength of the Jade clan was falling now. Although he is still among the top 6 clans, they are already casting their predatory glances. She remembered the day of ancestor worship. The students are weak, so the improvement progressed very slowly and led to this situation. She asked the ancestral spirits to guide the disciples on the path of power. Immediately, the protagonist fell from the sky. The empress thought that his appearance was definitely given to them by the spirits. In addition, this person has a special strength and body. Obviously, he has never improved, but he can explode with furious force. She didn't understand what kind of practices he was using. At that time, the protagonist was in the guard's room and took out tights. The protagonist was lying on the bed and looking at the tights. He thought that the system was idiotic, because how could such a shameful task be possible? Even if the girls of this era do not understand anything, it is clear that this is complete hooliganism. He didn't understand how to do it and his head was already spinning. Someone was watching the protagonist through the hole. It was a leak. She kicked down the door and shouted that he was caught and pointed at him with her finger, and the protagonist was very scared and asked what it was. The girl asked what he was holding in his hand right now. The protagonist hid the tights and he replied fearfully that he had nothing. The girl grabbed him and took out his hand with tights, saying that she had been watching him through the hole in the door for a long time. The protagonist was very embarrassed that she was sitting on him and asked her to calm down, because he was in a lot of pain. The protagonist, confused, replied that it was a bandage. His divine body is starting to charge. The charge level is 85%. The girl began to stretch the tights and said that it was a very strange bandage, and very elastic. The protagonist also noted that it was so dangerous that he almost charged up completely. The protagonist did not know. This charge is really accumulating. He needs to find a place to let off steam. Otherwise, sooner or later something will happen. The girl put the black stockings in her pocket and said that it was a very suspicious thing and that's why she was taking it away. The protagonist began to panic and wanted to say something. Techui immediately pinned the protagonist against the wall and said that he was very good at pretending. He was shaming her in front of the empress. The protagonist also assured that he really did not understand what she was talking about. Immediately, the girl threw a bag over the protagonist and replied that it didn't matter because he was going to die soon anyway. A moment later, she rushed out of the protagonist's house with Lan in a bag, who was screaming for help. The girl said that those who offend her will not live 3 days at home. The protagonist, sitting in a bag, thought that this crazy woman was going to drag him to a deserted place and finish him off. He began to panic a lot and did not understand why he was such a loser. Then this system wanted to kill him, then this one was abnormal. Immediately, the system reported that he had completed the second task. The protagonist was surprised and did not understand what it was. His reward, invisibility. The ability to be completely invisible for 3 minutes. The girl dragged the protagonist to the peak of Mount Wanman and threw the bag on the ground. Techui told him to go out and see what the place that would become a cemetery for him looked like. And some creatures were already looking at the girl from the forest. After that, the protagonist was digging a huge hole. Shang Lan asked Techui why take everything seriously. The protagonist thought that she was close to the truth and did not know what to do. The charging has not been completed yet. He does not know if it is worth communicating with her. The girl replied that she always clearly distinguishes between good and evil. He is digging a hole for himself. That is, only death awaits him. He has only 2 ways. Either she will bury him here or smash him to pieces. Of course, he has a third way. To demonstrate his strength, he has to hit her. The protagonist was very scared and shouted at her to turn her back on him. The girl thought that he wanted to deceive her. She would turn around and he would run away. She did this number when she was 6 years old. She won't fall for it. There were 2 monsters with guns behind her who wanted to kill her. She thought it was really dangerous. The monsters hit the ground, but the girl managed to jump away. Immediately, they started throwing spears at her, and she dodged, but one hit her right in the shoulder. The girl spun in the air and did not understand how many warriors from other clans could get here. Techui shouted that they were messing with the wrong one and hit the ground. She stood on the ground and said that those who would throw arrows at her from behind, she would take them to the empress. Immediately, the girl realized that she had been sent and it hurt her. The protagonist was sitting in the pit and also realized that the arrow was poisonous and the poison was too strong, and the girl couldn't even stand properly. After that, we are shown the head of a hostile clan. The old lady said that she wanted to pass unnoticed, but this insignificant offspring of the empress caught her eye, or they will kill her first and avenge her dead sons. Techui was surprised and couldn't even think what she would meet. She asked, she didn't come here to steal. The monster asked what to do with this boy and pointed his finger at the protagonist. The old woman replied that he was just a useless guardian and needed to be killed. The monster rushed at him, and Shang Lan shouted that they had misunderstood. He's just a lumberjack and doesn't know what kind of girl she is. Techui stood up and hit the monster with the words that she was their opponent, and the protagonist was surprised. The girl told Shang Lan that these people were their sworn enemies. They have been locked up for hundreds and thousands of years. Now they are making their way to them, having some kind of plan. She would detain them, and he had to return and report to the empress. The old woman realized that he was relying on her and said that she would kill him first and let magic into him. Immediately, Techui was greatly embarrassed. Immediately, a yellow ray appeared behind her, which protected the girl. The old woman was greatly surprised by all this. The protagonist held out his fist and said that was all she could say. Shang Lan came forward and said that he couldn't leave her alone and run away. He can't hold back anymore. The system informed him that the remaining energy of the divine body was 80%. The protagonist estimated that her strike accounted for only 5% of her body's energy. The old woman shouted for her sons to stand still and finish off the protagonist, and immediately they ran forward. The protagonist began to fight off the monsters and asked, if anything, why doesn't she go down and complete this task, or is she just afraid? He hit the last monster and it flew forward. Shang Lan shouted for her to come to him. Zhao Techui felt a strange feeling and blushed a little. The protagonist turned to the old woman and told her to run away while he gave her a chance. The leader was surprised. He held out his hands and told her to attack him with her strongest moves. He promises not to shy away from them. The girl was delighted and asked if she had been told about it. The old woman agreed with him and assured him that she would do as she said. The protagonist thought that he couldn't take too many risks. He uses 30% of his energy to defend himself. The old woman shouted for him to take a look at the strength of her clan. She began to create a lightning bolt and fired it at the protagonist. Techui screamed the protagonist's name out of fright. Shang Lan put down the block and tensed up a bit. The old woman shot a huge purple ray at the protagonist. After a moment, it was over and Shang was glowing yellow all over. The protagonist was confused and asked, and this is her strongest move? He felt that he was impenetrable, and she was worthless because she was wasting so much energy. The old woman was confused and simply did not believe it. She didn't understand how it didn't bother him and where this guy came from. After a moment, the protagonist screamed in pain and fell to the ground, and the old woman was surprised. Zhao Techui ran up to the protagonist and asked what was wrong with him. Zhang noted that this is an insidious trick. He missed it. The protagonist grabbed the girl by the hand and shouted for them to run away, and the old woman shouted for them to catch them. She also wondered if it could be that her strength would increase over time. The monster told them to look more carefully. They were both injured and couldn't run far. The protagonist and Techui were in the cave. The guy said that he had lost his strength and the girl asked what they should do now. Shang Lan asked her not to worry, because there was a way to get her back. He asked if the black stockings she took from his room were still with her. The girl, taking them out, agreed. She asked what she should do about it. Use everyone as a dressing for her wound. The protagonist replied in denial. He told her to put them on and was embarrassed. But Techui was at a loss. The girl began to slowly put on tights. Techui asked if it would really work. The protagonist noted that there is no time to linger. The protagonist asked how much time he had, and if he could still joke with him. Now the fate of all mankind is in her hands. Techui didn't understand what kind of material they were made of. They are so soft and silky. And where did this inexplicable feeling of shame come from? The girl blushed deeply and realized that she just needed to put them on. In a moment, they were completely on top of her. She felt that the tights were so tight, drafty, and hugged her bottom so tightly. It was a wonderful feeling. The system congratulated the protagonist on completing the third task. His reward, a charm capsule. After taking it, it can increase the attractiveness of a particular person by 300%. The duration is 1 hour. Sexual intercourse is prohibited during this time. The protagonist was glad that everything was done. The second reward, an amulet of evasion. After you put it on, you can get a 100% evasion effect from any attack for 20 minutes. The protagonist turned around and wanted to say something. But when I saw the girl, I was just shocked by her beauty, and Techui said that she kind of put it on. The protagonist charged his body to 105% and the system reported that it was dangerous. He was very hot and he thought his body was going to explode, so he ran out of the cave. The girl noted that he ran away so embarrassed and quickly, and I thought he was a noble man. The protagonist ran straight at the monsters, and they said they had found him. The protagonist, creating a ball in his hand, said that the superpower came to him just in time. He immediately shot a huge yellow ray at them, which flew through the entire forest. The old woman felt a great power and thought that the empress was here. The monster asked the head what they should do now. The old woman replied that it was time to give in to the evil spirits, and they should kill them. The monsters ran forward screaming. And at that moment the old woman began to run away and be afraid. She didn't want to die, so she decided to run away. The monsters ran at Chang and immediately a yellow ray flashed near them. After a moment, they all exploded. The protagonist ran up to the old woman and hit her in the back with a scream. Techui caught up with them and asked him not to kill the head, but to leave as a witness. The protagonist grabbed her by the hood and asked if she was breathing, and the old woman just grunted. Then he grabbed her by the hair and told her to tell them why they had come here. And the old woman wanted to confess everything in pain. The protagonist tied up the old woman and Techui said that the third and fourth sisters were guarding Lingfeng Gorge. There's not even a drop of water leaking out. She was wondering how they got in. Besides them, there is someone else. How many clans are there? The old woman was angry and said it was better to kill her because she wouldn't say anything. The old woman looked at the beautiful stockings of the girl. Immediately, the protagonist slapped her in the face and asked where she was staring at. She screamed that they could torture her as much as they wanted, but the revival of her clan could not be stopped. Even if he kills her, the other clans will come after them. She shouted that long live evil and began to glow. The protagonist used fast boots, grabbed Techui by the hand and shouted that they needed to run because the old woman decided to self-destruct. A moment later, a strong purple explosion thundered, but the protagonist was able to jump out of there. After that, the smoke cleared and the whole mountain was destroyed. The girl noted that the old woman really decided to self-destruct and called her crazy. The protagonist was upset because the speed boots turned out to be disposable. It was after midnight and the protagonist and Techui were in the Jade clan. The girl told him not to dare to tell anything about what happened today or she would cut out his tongue. The protagonist was surprised and wanted to say something about the clan. Techui repeated and told him to shut up. In response, the protagonist told him to take off his tights. The girl was embarrassed and replied that it was extremely obscene and she was taking them for herself. The protagonist said that she only needs him because she has poison in her system. The girl replied that she had such a low level of poison in her body. It only took her an hour to get it out of her system. She was just careless this time, and he shouldn't think she was weak. The protagonist, lying on the bed, thought that she was really stubborn and also closed his mouth. He was wondering if she could beat him. I also took my stockings. He hopes it's not because they're scary. He didn't know what kind of girl could refuse stockings. He also didn't understand what kind of other clans they were. Zhao Techui didn't want to tell him too much. There is also this entry system, but it is somehow incomprehensible. It clouds his head. Immediately, the goddess appeared to the protagonist and he asked why she had come to him. He asked if the system could tell him what he needed. He needed to find out information about other clans, and asked her to tell him. Other clans are non-human races that exist in this world, They are usually called demons. 20 years ago, a protracted war broke out between the alien clans. In the end, the human race paid a heavy price, but drove out the alien clans and shut them down in 10 forbidden zones, which were guarded by 6 Huazhu clans and 4 Shenzong clans. Over time, the forces of the alien clans recovered and they tried to attack in order to return to their world. What they're facing today is just an alien race sneaking in. The protagonist noted that 10 forbidden zones is quite a lot. He also added that the 100% charge of his divine body is equivalent to what level? The goddess replied that the levels go from top to bottom: spirit, initial, impenetrable heart, tempered character, leader, emperor, deity, lord, immortal. There are 9 levels in total. The current capacity of the divine body is 13 units. The power at 100% charge is equivalent to the 5th level, the leader. The protagonist was surprised. He asked with fiery eyes if it was possible to increase his capacity and how to do it. The system reported that every time he completes a task, he gets points. These points can be exchanged for items, such as a container. 100 points are required for every 10 units of capacity. At the moment, he has 13 points, which can only be exchanged for books. He was surprised that the points could be exchanged for books and said that he needed an item that would make him stronger. Lan asked which book would be able to do this. He immediately thought about it and asked if any book could be bought, and the goddess was surprised. After that, he bought an adult book for men. He was reading it and charging. At the moment, he already had 95% charge. He laughed and noted that with this book he would be able to maintain his divine body at a constant level, as he could take it anywhere. Immediately, the protagonist's heart began to beat and he felt something. The protagonist looked out the window and saw the ninjas who were jumping over the gate to the temple. He noted that they were fine and thought it was the Xuan giant clan. He looked at them and wondered why these idiots always sneaked in here in the middle of the night. Immediately, the system informed him that he would receive the 4th task. The protagonist was surprised, and the system informed him that he needed to specify a designated location to log in. Required time, 3 hours. The content of the task: to do adult business with the empress. Completion reward, unknown. The penalty for failure is death. The protagonist was confused by the task and asked the system to tell him when he could do it. After that, we are shown a table of levels. The current was at the 3rd level, an impenetrable heart. The old woman at level 4 is a hardened character. Xiaoning and Xuaniao were of an unknown level. After that, they show us the empress's palace, and there were already a lot of ninjas there. The protagonist followed them and noted that the defense was too weak and asked Zhao Techui what they should do. Techui was at home and looked at herself in the mirror and noted that she was very beautiful. After that, we are shown the square in front of the empress's bedchamber. There was a statue there and it was guarded by 2 guards. Immediately, someone hit these 2 girls from behind. At this time, the protagonist knocked down the guard of the bedchamber. He noted that judging by the direction of movement of these people, the target should be the empress's palace. As a guard, he needs to report to the empress as soon as someone attacks. There is nothing wrong with the fact that while he is reporting this to her, he will accidentally fall and touch the empress. The system told him that touching her didn't count as an adult thing, and the protagonist thought that he was a little genius. After a while, the protagonist was eavesdropping and did not understand why it was so quiet. He thought that these bastards had come before him. The protagonist opened the door and said that the guardian of the Jade clan was here and asked who dared to enter here. At that time, the empress was lying in her chambers and the protagonist was shocked by her beauty that he even bled. The protagonist turned to her to tell her everything. He noted that she did not look well and thought that she had been poisoned or bewitched. Zhang turned around and saw that purple-tipped arrows were flying at them. With a wave of his hand, he deflected a couple of arrows and got into a fighting pose. The protagonist looked at the arrow and realized that it was poisoned from another clan. She is not from the Xuan giant clan. It's an alien arrow. Immediately, the girl woke up and sighed. She saw a murky protagonist who said that these alien brutes were so brave. He didn't understand how they dared to infiltrate the Jade clan and make an attempt on the empress. If they were from the Xuan giant clan, he wouldn't have dared to kill them yet. But since these puppies are from another world, there's nothing to be offended about. Immediately, the empress stood up and hugged the protagonist, which made him very scared and surprised. Xuaniao asked if he was comfortable and asked him to hold her tightly. The protagonist did not understand what was wrong with her and why her body was so hot. The protagonist was trying to pull the empress away from him, and at that time the ninjas ran into the palace. One of them said that there were all 2 of them. The second one said that the empress was really unconscious and needed to kill them. The third wanted the evil spirits to help them, because the fate of the clan is in their hands. The ninja was already near the protagonist, and Zhang, out of fear, shouted for the empress to behave with dignity, because now was not the time, and Xuaniao asked if he wanted to do it. The ninja tried to hit the empress with his sword, but Zhang managed to grab her and jump away. Immediately, the system congratulated him on completing the 4th task and receiving a mysterious gift bag. She asked if he wanted to take a look at her now. The protagonist grabbed the empress and run away from the monsters, replied that now was not the right time. Ning asked the girl what those sounds were. She replied that the empress's bedchamber had been attacked. She was surprised by this and used their Jade clan as a vegetable market and rushed to the palace with the other girls. Immediately, they all hit the protective purple dome. All the girls fell to the ground, and Xiaoning realized that outsiders had made their way into their clan, some high level in purple robes. She understood that being in the purple robe was equivalent to the level of a sovereign. But if the empress was healthy, then it would not be difficult to deal with them, but she was afraid that she was too late. Immediately, the protagonist knocked out the wall and the empress asked her to hold it tight, and Zhang Runaway noted that she was very loose now. Immediately, a black lightning bolt struck behind him, causing everyone to be surprised. The protagonist landed and noted that this kid was here and was still holding Xuanyao in his arms, and she was very pleased. It was an alien overlord in a purple robe, and he noted that it was strange that there were men in the Jade clan. He laughed and added that Zhang had almost interfered with their clan's business. The protagonist replied that he should not worry, because he would completely interfere with his plan. He noted that this kid is strong. It's not worth fighting with him. The problem was that the surroundings were still under the spell. He didn't know what to do. The protagonist handed over a scroll with his belongings. He understood that those women outside could no longer be counted on. He had to find another way. The master did not understand what kind of spell the protagonist was doing and whether it obscured the view. He didn't understand anything. He held out the scroll and shouted that it was him. The scroll began to envelop the empress, and the protagonist said that it was translucent. This is the legendary one. Then the hedgehog began to glow, and the protagonist was just stunned, because he even shines through his clothes. He asked the system to get out of here. A goddess appeared next to him and wanted to say that he had something. But the protagonist got angry and asked what kind of crap she was constantly giving him. These boots they tore after the first run. The function of the translucent scroll is to make clothes transparent. He asked how about being completely transparent for 3 minutes. The protagonist's hands did not obey out of anger. He asked her. She bought all this on the street ruins for 2 yuan. The goddess was very angry and asked him to show respect. He said that if she wanted to help, she should let him open this gift. He'll even get down on his knees. The system replied that it was useless and threw it back. Immediately, the leader fired a purple ball at them. The protagonist got ready and said that he was not giving him time so that he could open his gift. Zhang hit the ball with his power and screamed. The system reported that the charge of the divine body has been reduced to 50%. The leader added that any actions before death are useless. A system prompt appeared where she asked if Zhang wanted to use the gift now. And at that time the protagonist was angry and replied that she should open it right now. Immediately, there was an explosion of purple and yellow energy. The leader was surprised that his power had been absorbed. The system congratulated him on obtaining an ancient magic weapon, the Giyan sword. This sword originally belonged to the human emperor Xuanyuan 3,000 years ago, and it can absorb the aura of heaven and earth, crushing demons. The head added that he had read about him in ancient books. The Giyan sword actually appeared in this world. He didn't understand how Zhang could end up in the hands of a worthless man like him. The protagonist asked what the hell he meant by worthless. He is totally worthy of it. The protagonist hit the ground and shouted that he was the defender of the Jade clan. The wave flew straight at the leader and he created a shield and asked with his cultivation base. He is still trying to harm him. Immediately, the protagonist's power penetrated the shield and destroyed the leader. The wave of force went on and destroyed the roof, and then she tore down the shield that the enemies had created, and the girls ran away, shouting at the girls, shouting for them to run and find the empress. Immediately, they all saw Xuanyao. Xiaoning ran up to the empress and burst out that she was fine, because she was so worried. Xiaoning also ordered the girls to destroy the remnants of the alien race, and they agreed. The empress said that she almost went crazy when she was training, but now she doesn't remember exactly what happened. She asked what happened to the palace. Xiaonan asked if she didn't know who defeated the alien race. Xuanyao replied that she had vaguely seen the man who had saved her from a fatal blow. The empress remembered the protagonist and wondered if it could be him. At this time, the protagonist was going home and his lower back was hurting. The power of this sword is too great. It felt as if his body had been emptied. The next day came after that. The empress was sitting on the throne and Xiaoning said that the alien captives explained that she was saved by a mysterious man named Captain. Moreover, they said that the Giyan sword magic weapon, which had disappeared for thousands of years, was in his hands. She wondered if it was the descendants of the Xuanyuan clan. The empress asked, but why did the man of the Xuanyuan clan appear here and why did he leave without saying goodbye? Xiaoning asked if it could be the same Shang Lan. Should she take him to the prisoners to check? The empress replied in denial. because since this man does not want to reveal himself, there is no need to force him. What worries her more is why an alien like the purple-robed high priest can bypass the defense line of the Forbidden Land and infiltrate the sect. Shouting replied that the disciples of the Xuanjian clan, whom they had chased away after they invaded the mountain gate a few days ago, had come to deliver a message. Alien races protected by other clans have also undergone changes. She's afraid they might be planning some big move. The empress was curious. They had not been disturbed for several years. They dared to come to the mountain gate of her Jade clan and cause a frenzy. She has to give the order. Tomorrow she will personally go to Lingfeng Gorge. It's time for these alien races to experience the power of the Jade Goddess clan again. Shang agreed with her and added that she and Techui would take 30 good assistants each to accompany them. The empress added that they didn't need so many people. Only the two of them could go with her, and she should also bring Shang Lan.
After that, we are shown the Lingfeng Gorge. Night had already fallen and the empress and her subordinates arrived, and all the girls knelt and greeted the master. We are introduced to the third student Techui and the fourth student Kingling. The empress told them to find out where the loophole was. Shouting asked the protagonist to stop, but Zhang felt sick because of the flight and threw up everything. The protagonist pretended to be a girl and said he was fine. He just got a little seasick and apologized. Shouting began to get angry and said that the local clan disciples still did not know that the man had joined the Jade Goddess clan. But the master asked him to accompany them. In order not to scare the students, she will allow them to be in women's clothes. The voice-altering spell is time-limited, so he doesn't have to beat around the bush. He should just show a little restraint and not create problems, and if he disobeys, he will regret it. The protagonist was afraid of her pressure and agreed with her. Shang Lan did not understand what was going on and why the master had brought him here. He thought that she had already found out that he had broken into her bedroom that night. Kingling asked Shouting who this girl was. She replied that she was a new student of the master. She brought her here to gain experience. Immediately, the empress called Shouting and she ran to her, and Kingling turned to the new girl. She began to examine her, and the protagonist was very confused. He didn't understand why Shouting had abandoned him and run away. He thought that he would definitely be exposed, and immediately the girl grabbed his hands. She said that it turns out that Zhang is their little sister, and she is her older named sister Kingling. She asked if this was her first time in Lingfeng Gorge and asked him to let her show her everything. Immediately, she dragged him along and said that they were all good sisters here, and the protagonist wanted to say something, but did not have time. After that, she said that Lingfeng Gorge is the protection of their clan from aliens. Thousands of miles of the Longmen Mountains stretch to the left and right, which even an eagle cannot cross, and only the middle canyon, which is no more than 100 meters wide, can be traversed. Over the millennia, the alien race has tried countless times to counterattack the Huizhou continent through this place, but all their attempts have ended in failure. The protagonist asked Kingling how the power level is distributed within the alien race. The girl replied that he had asked the right person. She was the best at questions about an alien race. In the alien race, the dominant one is the high priest, who is good at spells. Their ranks vary in the color of their robes. From the strong to the weak there are red robes, yellow robes, white robes, blue robes, purple robes, and ordinary priests. Below the priests are ordinary aliens. They are good at physical skills, but their fighting power is not particularly outstanding. But they are good at riding beasts. There are all kinds of ferocious beasts in the desert. They are numerous and extremely powerful, and special care and vigilance are needed with them. The protagonist realized that it was no wonder that the power of the high priest he encountered on the mountain was so different from the power of the high priest who attacked the palace. It turns out that the priests also have a hierarchy. Kingling walked up to the large tent and noted that the protagonist would definitely like it here. Zhang noted that it was a very large tent and he was wondering what was inside. Kingling thought that she was tired from the journey and suggested taking a good bath and relaxing. Lingfeng Gorge is famous for its hot springs, and Zhang was surprised. The protagonist was confused and replied that he was not tired. Kingling started to undress and called the protagonist and told him to come in and wash his face while they chatted. The protagonist came to the exit and said that he seemed to hear the master calling him. Kingling grabbed the protagonist and asked him not to worry, because no one is calling him. She was already sitting on him and asked if he didn't want to wash with her, and the protagonist blushed with embarrassment. He understood that something was wrong. He thought that she had found out that he was a man or that she loved women. Kingling approached the protagonist and asked if she had hurt him, but she really liked him very much. The protagonist realized that she was a lesbian. A system prompt immediately appeared. The host gave him task number 5. Task category: login. Time requirement: within 3 days. The purpose of the task is to make Kingling heterosexual. Punishment: being crushed by 5 strong men. The protagonist said that the system had gone crazy, and this punishment is just cruel. He knew he had to stop her first. The protagonist asked her to wait a minute. First he has to confess one thing. Tingling stood up and asked if she didn't think she was pretty enough. The figure of the elder sister is one of the best in the Jade Goddess clan, and the protagonist was just shocked. He was bleeding from excitement, and he realized that he still couldn't tell her that he was a man disguised as a woman. The girl laughed and noted that he said he was not interested, and as soon as she saw his body, her nose immediately bled. The protagonist thought he was finished. The girl stood up and said she would help him dry off. The protagonist covered himself and replied that he would do everything himself. Tingling noticed that something was wrong with his voice. Immediately, the protagonist ran out of the tent and shouted that the voice change spell was no longer working. Immediately, Tingling grabbed the protagonist with a ribbon and dragged him back. She grabbed him and threw him into the bathroom. The girl sitting in the water asked how he could fall asleep without taking a bath, while the protagonist, looking at the naked Tingling, was stunned. The girl approached him and grabbed his clothes and said that she would help him undress, and the protagonist asked not to touch him. Immediately, Tingling was surprised when she saw something. The protagonist's watermelons fell out of his clothes and he thought it was over. She grabbed and crushed the watermelon with a squeeze of her hand and noted that it was no wonder now that he refused to wash with her. Tingling hadn't realized yet that the protagonist was a guy and started crying and said it wasn't his fault that he had small breasts. She shouldn't be shy about it. The protagonist was shocked and noted that she knows how to draw interesting conclusions. The girl hugged the protagonist and asked him not to worry, because from now on no one will be able to laugh at him. Big Sister will always protect him. The protagonist got very excited and felt that he was at the top of his life. Immediately, the girl was very embarrassed. She pushed the protagonist away from her and looked down. She began to get very angry and asked what it was. Jiang made cute eyes and said that he wanted to explain it earlier, but didn't have time. Immediately, a strong explosion thundered into the tent and a huge ray flew out of the tent, and the girls were surprised. Ikai, Shouting, and the Empress were surprised by the noise. Ikai felt an infuriating hesitation and thought that Tingling was in danger. Besides her, she doesn't feel any more hesitation and asked what happened to her, and the girls looked at the red ray. Shouting was confused and thought that the effect of the voice-changing spell had expired, and Ikai was at a loss. The protagonist appeared, who was running away from Tingling and asking for help. Immediately, another explosion thundered behind him and the protagonist flew forward. He fell into the camp and the girls screamed that the man was in the camp and were surprised, and the protagonist hit the rock. The system informed the protagonist that his current charge is 120%. A very angry Tingling was walking towards the protagonist and he thought that despite the fact that his body was about to explode, he could not harm this woman. The girl swung her weapon in a rage and shouted for him to die. Shouting immediately appeared, who blocked the blow near the protagonist and asked Tingling to stop. The girl shouted that he had deceived her because he was a man. Shouting knew this and added that she couldn't kill him. Tingling didn't understand why. The girl replied angrily that he was a servant whom the master had taken to guard the mountain gate. Tingling was surprised. She started shouting that there had never been any men in their Jade Goddess clan, and asked how they had allowed him to guard the mountain gate. Shouting whispered in Tingling's ear that the clan master had his own plans in this regard, and therefore she should not fool around. The girl agreed not to kill the protagonist, but as punishment, she would cut him a little and took out her blade, and Shouting was surprised. The protagonist did not understand what kind of wildness it was. She immediately ran after him and shouted for him to stop, and he asked her to calm down. The Empress immediately appeared and said that since Tingling was aware, she would not harm his life. Shang Lan didn't follow the rules, and it was time to teach him a lesson. After that, she told Ikai to show her the distribution of the alien camps again, and the girl agreed. After that, the protagonist hid and using the system noted that this crazy woman did not understand how to calm her down. Immediately, a dagger flew at his feet, but he managed to bend and was scared. Tingling said that she hates men the most in her life and asked how dare he run away from her. For this, he will receive his punishment. The protagonist was very afraid and asked her to calm down. The protagonist took a pill and decided to try something. He immediately began to glow so much that the girl even had to cover herself with her hand. Tingling didn't understand what trick she was trying to pull off. The protagonist seemed very handsome to her and he asked her how she was doing. The girl blushed and did not understand why she felt strange. Immediately, she began to turn her head and tried to wake up. The girl got angry and said harshly that he would pay for it. The protagonist approached her and took her by the chin and asked what price he would have to pay, but the girl did not know what to say. She knew that something was wrong because she was very excited and even covered herself from embarrassment. The protagonist hugged the girl and asked why she was in a hurry to leave, or she doesn't dare to meet his eyes, and the girl's legs give way. The girl was very embarrassed and blushed and asked the protagonist to leave because she can't stand it anymore. The protagonist understood that his charm had increased by 300%. It was really powerful, but he did not understand what to do next. He realized that he needed to read more novels. Zhang thought about kissing her hard, hugging her tight, and going lower, but he didn't know where to start. Immediately, the protagonist hugged the girl and took hold of her waist. The girl screamed out of embarrassment so much that the protagonist was even surprised. Shang Lan noted that she had such a strong reaction, even though he just touched her waist. The girl pulled away and looked at the protagonist a little embarrassed. Qingling licked her lips and said that she would like to see what was so good about him. She knocked him to the ground and noted that if she dared to provoke her, he had to be prepared for her to squeeze all the juices out of him. The protagonist started shouting for her to stop. He understood that she was completely out of control. He doesn't know if she's going to break his pickle. She obviously changed her orientation, but the task was not completed. Immediately, the girl grabbed his pants and told him to take them off. The protagonist blushed and resigned himself to saying that he tried his best. Immediately, the girl stopped and fell silent, and the protagonist was surprised. She got very angry and asked what he had done to her. The protagonist began to cry and did not understand why the pill stopped working at this stage. The girl created a weapon and shouted that she would cut them into pieces. Zhang asked out of fright if she was going to kill him. Immediately, the girl's legs became stiff, just like the whole body. She started to take off and Qingling shouted to be let go, and Zhang was surprised. The girl turned and saw Xiaoning and Ikai. She asked her sister to let her go because she had to kill him. Xiaoning noted that he really changed Qingling's orientation. She was very interested. Ikai noted that Qingling was humiliated, and therefore asked why she saved this man. She replied that if Qingling changed her orientation, then every disciple of their clan would be able to cultivate with peace of mind, without worrying about Qingling harassing her. She found Shang Lan very useful. Although the protagonist did not hear what they said, he always feels when he is praised. After that, it was early morning and they showed us the camp. The protagonist was sleeping in a tent and coming out of it noted that he was fine. He understood that it was obvious that the charge had reached 120% last night and had not been released. His current remaining energy is 100%. But after sleeping, not only did his body not explode, but his charge dropped to 100%. He didn't understand if the energy had been lost or if his storage capabilities had expanded. Immediately, he turned his attention to the girl who was sitting on the rock behind him. It was Qingling, who was very angry and clutched rocks and popped them. The protagonist laughed nervously and said that he would probably go to the hut. He knew that he must not fall into her hands, otherwise she would tear him apart. Shonen immediately appeared and grabbed the protagonist and told him not to move, but he was surprised. They flew on a sword and he asked her where they were going. The girl told him not to ask what he shouldn't ask. She doesn't know what he did to Qingling, but if he was able to change her sexual orientation, it could be considered a great achievement. The protagonist thought about it and thought that they also want to change Qingling's orientation. She added that Qingling has a strong temperament, and if she really goes berserk, he might not be able to stop her. If he is in danger, he can directly seek help from the clan master. Immediately, the protagonist looked at the beautiful empress, who was also heading forward. He blushed and noted that there are countless beauties in the Jade Goddess clan, but the real incomparable beauty is still the clan master. Immediately, the system informed him that it was giving him a task to log in. Time requirement, within 1 day. The purpose of the task, Master Xuaniao must put on the JK uniform. Reward for completion, unknown. Punishment, 10,000 arrows piercing the heart. The protagonist was confused by this information. He even started to panic and seemed to turn into a dog. After that, we are shown a certain alien citadel. There were big monsters working at full speed, and they were beaten with whips. Immediately, the Empress said that alien bugs dare to leave the Forbidden Land without permission and disturb the peace. The monsters were shocked by her. There were already other girls around the Empress who were using their powers. She added that today, the army of her Jade Goddess clan went on a campaign to avenge this. The girls launched all their techniques directly at the monsters, from which some could only run away. Qingling was still furious and dealt with the monsters with cruelty. The protagonist saw all this, how she screamed at monsters and killed them, and he noted that this girl scares him. Shonen said that the largest food center of the alien race on the front line was destroyed by them. It definitely exceeds their expectations, and they will definitely calm down for a while. The protagonist didn't know if it was unexpected. The alien race did not know that the clan master would be angry. Couldn't they have predicted it? Shang Lan asked if there was a possibility that this place was actually a trap, and Shouting was surprised. The empress was immediately surprised and asked again. Shouting said that Jean Lan reminded her, an alien race attacking their clan couldn't help but expect them to strike back. This citadel is closest to the front line and is also a food center. She did not understand how the alien race could not take defensive measures and let them attack. She figured there must be something wrong here. Ling flew up to them and said that Shouting was too trusting. All this was coming from the mouth of a liar, and she didn't understand how she could believe his nonsense. The protagonist replied that he was just being careful. The situation is really a bit strange. It's better to retreat first, and then think over a long-term plan. Ling flew into battle and shouted that it was just ridiculous. They know how valuable this food is for aliens. Whether it's a trap or not, they'll find out after they activate it. She flew forward and destroyed the men and screamed at them to go to hell. The protagonist was a little afraid, because he understood that it was all about personal resentment. Immediately, Ling opened the door and the guard even flew away. She noted that there were so many food bags, but she had a feeling that they were filled with sand. The monster guard accidentally pierced the bag with his horn and there really was sand inside, which surprised her greatly. At this time, Shouting turned around and asked why there was a sandstorm here at this time. The protagonist looked up and noted that this was an even bigger problem, and Shouting was very surprised. Huge meteorites like Madaras were falling from the sky. Ling noted that all the food had been moved, and it was dangerous. Immediately, she was caught in a sandstorm and screamed. The empress created a shield with the other students and she shouted not to retreat and form a defensive line. Shouting told the master that it was worth leaving the attack area first. The empress noted that it was useless. The coverage area was too wide. If they moved, they would only suffer heavy losses. She asked where Shang Lan was, and Shouting turned around and hoped that he had not fallen down. At this time, the protagonist used 10% of the energy to fly. He had been telling them for a long time that they needed to leave, but they wanted to stay and wreak havoc. Now he had to sort out their mess. First, they used a normal-sized meteor to surprise the enemy. Then they used a sandstorm to limit visibility. And then they dropped a giant meteor unnoticed. He noted that monsters are calculating, but he was sorry that they had miscalculated his existence, and he decided to strain himself and release 90% of the energy. And with one blow, he destroyed the meteorite. After that it was over and he was in shock. He began to fall, because all his energy was used up. Immediately, someone picked up the protagonist. It was the empress, and she asked if he had destroyed that huge fiery meteor. He was very embarrassed, because the empress was holding him, and the girl was surprised. Immediately, the system reported that it was 100% charged very quickly. A moment later, they lowered it down and Shouting flew up to them and told the empress that Ling was missing and she had probably been kidnapped. And she has just received a signal for help from the camp. The main forces of the alien race are attacking the camp. The empress noted that this act of the alien race really opened her eyes. If they return to the camp, they won't be able to save Ling. She added that she would stay and save Ling, and they should return to the camp. The protagonist said that this time the alien race was well prepared, and even if the deputy clan master caught up with them, she could become a target and fall into the hands of the enemy. He suggested that the safest solution would be to send someone they have only known for a short time. The empress was surprised and understood his thought. The empress, entering the house, called the protagonist to follow her, and he smiled maliciously. After that, they were already inside and she said that she did not know why he was hiding his power, but it was difficult to hide it from her eyes. She asked if he had saved her in her bedroom that night. The protagonist noted in embarrassment that she was wise and did not think that she would find out. The empress noted that his strength was superior to Lu Xuning's, so she could be sure that he would save Ling, and also realized that he was the one who saved her that night. Immediately, the protagonist began to fall and Xuaniao asked what was wrong with him. The protagonist was embarrassed by the sight of the empress and said that this trick with the meteor had exhausted all his energy. He had no strength left. She asked how long it would take to restore his energy. The protagonist replied that the exercises he was practicing were very peculiar, and it was not difficult to recover, but he needed her help. The protagonist handed her clothes and told her to put them on, and he would be able to recover in a second, even if only a drop of blood remained from him. The empress noted that these clothes were curious, neither linen nor silk, and did not understand what material they were made of. The protagonist replied that it didn't matter, she had to wear it, and that was it. The girl started to get a little angry and asked if wearing this skirt could restore his strength, and he really thinks she's an idiot. The protagonist swore that he wasn't lying. These clothes seem ordinary, but in fact they hide a mysterious power. As long as she wears it, she can channel the spiritual energy of heaven and earth into his body. After a while, she will feel his inner strength and make sure that it is true. The girl thought about it, because since he appeared, he helped them at critical moments, so there shouldn't be any bad thoughts. Besides, she just needs to change her clothes. She's not risking anything, but she blushed a little. The girl said that time was running out, so she would trust him, but only this time. He should also turn away. She will let him know when he finishes changing clothes. The protagonist turned around and agreed with her. After that, the girl behind the bags began to undress. She didn't understand why this shirt was so tight and this skirt was too short. The protagonist replied that these magical clothes must be different from the usual ones. After a moment, the empress told Zhang that he could turn around and he agreed with her with a lustful look. Xuaniao looked just incredible and she noted that it was some kind of strange style. The protagonist immediately covered his banana and was shocked. The system congratulated the protagonist on completing the 6th task. Immediately, the protagonist literally caught fire with power, and the empress felt a powerful force and realized that he was telling the truth. A huge beam appeared from that house and it was a crazy upgrade. The system told him that a professional crazy heart was installed. The capacity of the divine body has been increased to 2,000 units, which is equivalent to the 9 heavens stage after 100% charging. The protagonist told her to provide kindling to him. He would return her in one piece. After that, we are shown an ominous alien cave where there were many monsters. There were guards inside and a suspended kindling. The protagonist found her. The locator that he bought with the help of system points is really useful. It was a female locator. The cost is 4 points and the current balance is 16 points. After that, monsters came into the room and one said that his master was really smart and had achieved excellent results. This woman has killed countless of his children, and this time he can finally take revenge. When she wakes up, he'll let the boys line up and have a good time with her, and they can throw it into the desert to feed the wolves. The other laughed and asked that they had such an opportunity, and he just wanted revenge, so it was not surprising that their race ended up in this hole. The head immediately got angry, and the other said that if the master had any plans, they could implement them. He said that for thousands of years, the Jade Goddess clan had been able to prevent them from crossing Lingfeng Gorge. This is not because they are powerful, but because of the core of the guardian spirit placed in the gorge. The core of the guardian spirit is designed to suppress aliens, and as soon as an alien enters its sphere of influence, the power of any alien is significantly reduced. The monsters noted that this was true. They tried countless ways to destroy the core, but they could not. He noted that the core of the guardian spirit is the biggest obstacle to the revival of their clan. The gentleman replied that they would have the opportunity to destroy him, as long as he uses a spell to control Kingling's mind. They should let her come back and destroy the spiritual core. The head noted that this was a wonderful plan and did not understand why he did not think about it. His son replied that when it comes to guile and cunning, the human race is not their equal and this gentleman is indeed the savior of their race. The protagonist overheard all this and realized that it was a good trick to get her to do everything herself. Now it is clear who led the tactics of the alien race. To use a human to help an alien race, he considered him a scumbag. The head said that we need to do this together and cast a spell. Immediately, dark energy began to penetrate the girl. The protagonist, creating fireballs in his hands, noted that the spell is very expensive. He can't miss such a precious opportunity. He immediately put the abilities right into their spell. Everyone was surprised and did not understand what was happening, and at that time everything began to be destroyed. They also thought that the Jade Master was here. Immediately, the head noticed that Kingling had escaped. The monster said it was impossible. She was injured and couldn't recover her strength in 3 hours. Someone took her away. Someone took her away. It's definitely not a Jade Master, it's just a mouse that snuck in. He shouted for them to block all exits and search. The protagonist quickly ran away with Kingling. The girl asked why it was him. She doesn't want him to save her. The protagonist asked, is this a joke? Why does he need her consent to do what he wants? Immediately, he saw in front of him a huge worm with one eye and a huge mouth. He stopped immediately. Zhang unleashed his power on him and shouted at him to go to hell. Immediately, everything began to collapse and he was surprised. They began to fall down and he realized that this mountain was too fragile. After that, they show us the dungeon. The protagonist broke through the ceiling and fell down. The girl flew after him and the protagonist looked at the top and got a little excited. She landed right on his face and he felt great. Kingling immediately stood up and noted that it was quite painful. The protagonist was lying on the floor and Kingling asked why his nose was bleeding and if he was injured. The protagonist was happy and replied that he was fine. The monsters from above shouted that the protagonist had fallen down and they had to report to the high priest. Kingling noted that this was not good, because they had already been discovered. Jiang grabbed the girl's hand and said that everything was fine. There were many passages in this cave. It would not be so easy to find them. The protagonist walked forward and did not understand where this light was coming from, and why this cave was green and bright. She looks really creepy. Kingling asked if they would find a way out. The protagonist looked into the room and was surprised. It was the place where the ancient ancestors of the alien race rest. The protagonist thought that they had fallen into someone's ancestral grave. Immediately, the system congratulated him. He arrived at the secret location of the mission. He receives a reward, Xuan Tian Dan Dian. The download to the brain has also begun. She noted that it is not advisable to stay here for a long time and they should leave. Immediately the download was completed. He assured the mastery of the knowledge of Xuanchen Dan Dian. The protagonist had a headache and the girl asked what was the matter. Jiang turned around and replied that everything was fine. The system has hammered so many things into his head. He's afraid he's going to become schizophrenic because of it. The protagonist asked if she was so worried about him and she didn't fall in love with him. The girl was confused and asked what kind of nonsense he was talking. She said that the smelly man's brain is really abnormal. She will ignore him. From now on, he shouldn't bother her. Then she noticed that the protagonist did not follow her. Kingling returned and asked why he still wasn't leaving. The protagonist took the bone and replied that he knew why this whole cave was glowing green. The remains of these alien ancestors are high-quality medicinal materials. In the alchemical writings, they are called the bones of the soul. The light in the cave is the spiritual energy that these soul bones have lost over the years. Immediately, the monsters noticed them and ran after Kingling. The girl ran up to the protagonist and the monsters said that they could not arbitrarily enter the tomb of the ancestors and they had to leave. The head asked how they dared to break into the tomb of their ancestors. It's not enough to tear him to pieces. The protagonist replied that he advises them not to act rashly. This place is full of spiritual energy, and if he casts a fireball spell, the head knows what the consequences will be. The head shouted at him not to fool around, because they can come to an agreement. If they have any requirements, just specify them and they guarantee their fulfillment. The monster told the others to prepare to kill them with ranged spells. The protagonist asked Kingling how she thought the fireball would take care of them, and she was shocked. Immediately, the protagonist began to panic violently and got scared. The head started screaming, and the monster felt sorry for the ancestors. The protagonist bent his finger and stopped the ball, saying that he was just joking and they should not be nervous. All the monsters breathed a sigh of relief and said that he had scared them and it was not bad. The protagonist turned and a fireball slipped out of his hand, and the monsters were surprised again. The head even tensed up a lot and began to panic. The ball flew straight into the dice and Kingling asked. This time he was also joking. But the protagonist replied in denial and was very scared. Jiang told the system to put all the soul bones in the vault. She said that permission to store foreign objects is not currently included. If he needs to activate it, he needs to pay for a subscription. 3 points for a monthly subscription, 30 points for an annual subscription, 50% discount for new customers. The promotion is limited. Total, 15 points. The protagonist was just in shock. After a moment, the system began to suck all the bones into the vault. He was delighted, because the system managed to save everything and the fireball did not destroy anything. The protagonist said that now they can stop worrying. He grabbed Kingling and shouted that it was time for them to run, and the monsters wanted to kill them. They quickly rushed into the tunnel. The head decided to use the dark forces and shouted at them to stand. Shang Lan created a fireball and wanted to use it in the chapter, and Kingling told him not to fight them. The protagonist shot a ball into the tunnel so that it began to collapse, but the magic of the head of the monsters got into the protagonist's body and pierced him. Immediately, the tunnel collapsed and blocked the entrance. The head managed to move away, but was angry that he had missed them. Another monster caught up with the head and noted that they had gone into this cave, but there was no way out, so the curse would torture him to death. The protagonist fell to the floor and said that the curse was really terrible. It had a penetrating effect and caused severe pain. Kingling approached him and noted that the white-robed priest's magic attack was very strong and defensible. Ordinary people die from it, but it will survive. Immediately, the protagonist realized that they were at a dead end, and they needed to clear the blockage and get out. However, he must first find a way to contain the curse. The protagonist asked the girl how her body was recovering. She seemed to be trying to seduce him and replied that she was fine. The protagonist blushed at the sight of the girl and asked again. Kingling was excited and replied that she was fine, she was just thinking. After that, everyone else ran up to them and they began to create a huge seal. The head said that this blockage of basalt stone is extremely durable and will weaken the effect of their spells, so they should use all their strength. The monster wanted them to bleed to death through 7 holes today. At this time, Kingling hugged the protagonist's legs and he replied in embarrassment that now was not the time for that. Those aliens outside must be fooling around, they need to figure out a way to get out of here quickly. And Kingling asked him not to leave. Immediately, he came up with the idea that he could use these soul bones to clear. The girl knocked him to the floor and said that this little cutie would not be able to escape. She approached his face and asked if he could help her, because she feels so awkward, and the protagonist was trying to restrain himself. She took his hand and put it on her hip. Then he looked at her beautiful body. Jang couldn't stand it anymore. This part is really her sensitive spot and she took the initiative to let him touch her, and no one will be able to bear it. She moved even closer to him and said his name, preparing to kiss him. There was an immediate impact. She was hit on the neck and lost consciousness. He panicked and noted that it was so close that he almost couldn't hold back. He also noticed that although they say that men cannot restrain themselves, but real men should not use a girl to their advantage. He apologized to her, but it was the only way to calm her down. The system reported that its current charge is 180%, and it should release energy immediately. The protagonist asked her not to worry. As soon as he unearths the blockage, he will immediately release her. Just 1% of the soul bones is enough and return them through the portal. He used his power and irradiated himself with the power of bones. The head was eavesdropping and noted that there was no movement and thought that they were already dead. He examined the stones and invited them to clear the blockage and come in to look, and at this time they began to heat up and turn red. A moment later, there was a strong explosion and all the monsters scattered like stones. The monster said they were out and needed to be attacked. All the remaining ones used their powers on them, but the protagonist went ahead with Kingling and asked them if they still use curse attacks and assured them that this trick was completely useless in front of their ancestors' defenses. The monster did not understand how this was possible, because all their attacks were reflected. Jang added that it took less than 30% of energy to refine these 2 sets of armor. He's still holding back. He started creating a huge fireball with the words that now he would have to create a problem for all of them in order to throw out the rest. The head started to panic, because this is the grave of his ancestors, and asked if he could leave everything as it is.
It was the same monster and he came with a white flag. He came with peaceful intentions. He wants to see the empress of the Jade Goddess clan. He was outside the camp. The girls were standing on a rock and Shannon thought it was strange, and asked if the aliens really wanted to beg for mercy. The empress noted that they were scared by Shang Lan and might have thought that they had invented an artifact that could withstand their spells. Shouting should take the monster to the camp and call Shang Lan, and she agreed. After that, he was in the main hall and Kingling shouted that he dared to come to their camp alone and asked if he wanted to destroy the core of the guardian spirit. The monster started to panic and replied that it was all a misunderstanding. They once insulted the Jade Goddess clan. He asks to forgive their mistakes and spare their clan. Outside the camp there are 30 wagons with blue crystals, which are a piece of his family's heart. He also asks the empress to accept them. Shanning thought that the blue crystal is a rare ore that is native to an alien race. It is very useful for cultivation. The entire Jade Goddess clan only has a few pounds of this ore. The aliens really sent so many. It's a lot of money, and the empress was thinking. The protagonist immediately appeared and thought that he wanted to buy his life for this piece of garbage. He asked if he really thought they were that poor. Kingling was surprised, because after she pumped him with a special fragrance, he had to sleep at least until tomorrow. She did not understand why he woke up quickly and assumed that he had not slept at all. The protagonist went ahead and said that if they want to survive, they must first expose the person behind all these. Also, tell them clearly how the alien team that tried to kill the Empress bypassed Ling Feng. The monster began to panic. Xiaoning was surprised and thought that Zhang was right. These are the most important issues for the Jade Goddess clan. She was almost fascinated by the blue crystals and found Zhang Lan to be very reserved. The monster said in a panic that he only knew that this man called himself Min, and he never revealed his true identity, nor did he talk about his identity and origin. He led them in search of a secret road 30 miles west of Lingfeng Gorge, along which they were able to pass through the Longmen Mountains. The protagonist put a finger with a fireball to his head and asked where he was now. The monster replied that when Zhang came to rescue Kingling, he immediately disappeared. He did not know where he had gone. The protagonist asked if he was a man or a woman. The monster replied in a panic that it was a man and he was sure of it. Zhang Lan thought about it. Then the possibility of traitors appearing in the Jade Goddess clan could be ruled out. He wondered who it could be. After that, Shouting and the Empress discussed Shang Lan and said that he was really talented. Since the alien race did not give out the mine, he blackmailed 10 more wagons of blue crystals. When Kingling destroys the secret path and returns, they must give them a decent reward and we can return to the clan. Immediately, Shouting said that there was good news. Shang Lan cured Kingling's attraction. She asked if she noticed how Kingling was looking at Shang Lan. She didn't want to kill him at all, but instead to do something else. Immediately, the Empress looked back with a slightly malicious look. The Empress turned away and Shouting was confused and did not understand what she had said wrong, and why she suddenly turned around. After that, they show us the training room. The protagonist was lying on the rocks and did not know if this blue crystal could help in cultivation. He just wanted to help them lure out 10 more carts, but they were so happy that they were speechless. He really doesn't understand these cultivators. The system informed them that it would give them the task for entry number 7. The purpose of the task: to force the next person who enters the training room to put on an old uniform. The uniform was placed in storage. Time requirement: within 3 days. Completion reward: unknown. Punishment: death by lightning strike. The protagonist thought it would be fun this time. The protagonist felt that someone was coming towards him and wondered what kind of little cutie it would be. It was Ikai who entered the room. Shang Lan thought it would be a piece of cake. She can't see anything anyway, so he'll just find a reason to trick her into wearing it. The girl sat down and began to undress, and the protagonist was shocked and covered his bottom. The protagonist realized that now that it had come to this, no matter what, he couldn't let her know that he was here, otherwise he was finished. He hadn't expected this at all. The protagonist began to panic and decided to escape before she noticed. Immediately, the girl heard a sound and lifted the bandage from her ear a little. She used her power from her finger and asked who was here, but the protagonist managed to dodge. Zhang felt that this girl was too fierce. He can't move, even if he dies, she shouldn't see him. She thought it was her imagination and continued to take off the blindfold. And the protagonist was just shocked. Her eyes were very shiny and white. Looking at her, the protagonist was surprised and did not understand. She really did not see at all. Such beautiful eyes, and he was sorry. The Empress entered the tent and asked Ikai to come out for a while. The girl turned around and was surprised. Ikai quickly dressed and agreed with the master. And the protagonist turned to the wall and asked the Empress not to look at him. Ikai left. The Empress went to the protagonist, and he, in turn, crept to the exit. She was a little angry and said that even though Ikai looks harmless, she cultivates the unity of heart and sword. The sword that dominates the world. If he dares to provoke her again, he must not think that she will be able to save him. The protagonist didn't know what to say. Then she sat down and asked him to sit next to her, because she needed to know something about his opinion, and the protagonist was delighted. After that, she told him that he should also know that the Jade Goddess clan is one of the 6 clans. Since most of the members of her sect are women, the other 5 sects often harass them. News has just arrived that the annual Martial Arts Improvement Conference of the 6 clans will be held in 3 days. This is an opportunity for the outstanding students of each clan to learn from each other, as well as an occasion to test the strength of each clan. He was also punished for peeping and hit on the head. But now all the best students are either in seclusion or guarding the clan, and only Ikai and Techui's student will be able to participate. The Jade Goddess clan has been at the bottom of the rankings for 3 years in a row, and it will be unpleasant if it happens again this year. She is afraid that they are about to drop out of the list of 6 clans. The protagonist asked, "Isn't it unnecessary to put the 3 best students in the guard? She can take one of them with her." She replied that he would understand when he saw them in the future that they were not easy to take away from the mountain gate. The conference was suddenly postponed, and she can't wait for the senior student to finish her seclusion. After thinking about it, she is afraid that there is only one solution. After that, we are shown the top of the Lingyun clan. The protagonist disguised himself as a girl, and someone noted that the Jade Goddess clan master Zheng Xuanyao. Participating students Yichai, Shang Lan, and Zhao Techui arrived. The head noted that Xuanyao is here and she can sit down. A girl from this temple showed them their seats and asked them to sit down and laughed. Xuanyao and Techui began to get angry. The latter shouted and asked what it all meant. He makes them sit in a corner, and they also put up a broken table. The protagonist intervened and said that he had long heard that the Lingyun clan's finances were limited. They had some difficulties. They really look poor. Fortunately, they brought their own tables and chairs so they can all sit down. The protagonist spent points on the presidential luxury table, and the head was surprised. The protagonist pulled back a chair and asked the Empress to sit down. Initially, the enemy clans wanted to disgrace the Jade Goddess clan, but they got dirty in the shit. The guy stood up and shouted that they shouldn't be sitting there. The head replied that everything was fine, and he could just ignore them. He didn't care how happy they were tonight. It was just a bluff. When the competition starts tomorrow, there will be a good show. After that, the morning came and the conference on improving the martial arts of the 6 clans begins. They show us a martial arts field. In the first round, the Wangxingzong clan will fight the Jade Goddess clan. A disciple of the Wangxingzong clan, Lin Qingyun, and a disciple of the Jade Goddess clan, Ikai. The head asked Xuaniao that this Shang Lan was only here to replace another student. If they can't send a decent student, then they could just refrain. He didn't understand why bother fighting when they were going to lose. Lin and Ikai were already facing each other. The judge added that the winner of this round automatically moves on to the next round. Until all three of the same clan lose, the battle will not end. They need to improve and learn from each other, not harm anyone's life, and they can start. The protagonist was surprised that Lin was fighting in armor, because this opponent's position is too unequal. Techui replied that they practice cruel and unusual foreign kung fu. Compared to them, their advantages cannot be fully exploited. Ikai immediately released her power into him right from her fingers. Lin deftly dodged the best girl. And Techui added that they said that the rivals are determined by lot, but they fight the Wangxingzong clan every year, and asked if he thought it was strange. The protagonist noted that even such a ferocious sword aura could not penetrate this armor. Techui said that all their armor is made of high-quality ore. She can't directly attack him in the head. It really makes it harder to win. Lin tried to hit her, but Ikai dodged. She immediately started attacking him and added that aiming at the same point and continuous attacks, no matter how strong the armor was, he could still be defeated. It seems to her that Ikai has come up with a way to restrain the enemy. Immediately, Ikai began to feel dizzy. Techui realized that her rivals were using vertigo stones to interfere with Ikai's hearing. Lin hit Ikai right in the face and she flew backwards. She flew out of the arena and ran towards her sister. The head said that there is no chance of losing here and that the Wangxingzong clan wins in the first round. Lin asked who was next and quickly. Techui was very angry and the second round began. She decided to do it and rushed forward. She shouted that in order to win, they were using insidious methods. Lin, dodging her hammer, said that with such skills, he asked if the Jade Goddess clan should still be among the 6 clans. He's ashamed of her. She was just furious with his words and told him not to dare to say such a thing. She hit him with all her might, but he decided to take the hit. The hammer immediately began to crack. A moment later, the hammer collapsed and the girl flew up. Ikai had already regained consciousness and only managed to shout the name of Techui. The judge said that the Jade Goddess clan had lost 2 rounds in a row and asked if they wanted to continue. And Ikai was very angry. Zhang told Yichai to take the flow down and rest, and leave the rest to him. The head started to get angry and said that he was suggesting that they refrain and save the Jade Goddess clan from further disgrace. One of his students defeated them all. It would be too embarrassing if this spread. Lin said that a nobody like him shouldn't impose his presence. Also, so that he doesn't think he can win with a little ingenuity like yesterday. He must bow down and get out of here, otherwise he will destroy it with his steel fist. The protagonist noted that he was so funny, because he added a strengthening talisman to his hand. Being a bitch and putting on airs is so shameless. Lin got angry and rushed forward, telling him to shut up, because he was finished. The head asked Lin not to finish too quickly, because he had to save the Jade Goddess clan from further ridicule. The protagonist immediately hit Lin and he flew up. Zhang told her to stop bragging, because he hadn't lost yet. The Supreme God was here, and he asked who would dare to act rashly. And the head's face changed to the dog's face, which was shocked. The head did not understand how this was possible, because Lin Qingyun, the best disciple of the Wangxingzong clan, could not fight back against the girl. He asked if the Jade Goddess clan really had such a cruel cultivation technique. The protagonist noted that he took him down with 1 punch and it was too cool. The system reported that there were 2/3 remaining glove uses. The head was angry and shouted that Lin was an idiot, because he relaxed after winning 2 rounds and Qin Fu should follow. Qin Fu from the Wangxingzong clan jumped onto the field. He was here, the consummate Qin Fu, the invincible hot wheel. The most terrible thing about this movement is that it concentrates all the power in the arms and legs. Combined with its extremely high speed, it can be called a deadly weapon. Qin Fu once used this technique to break through 100 miles of alien races and kill countless enemies. No one knew how Shang Lan would handle him. The protagonist just hit again and Qin Fu flew up. Zhang noted that the technique is good, but some other time. The empress laughed sweetly and apologized, because her student is a little cruel, and the head shouted for Siluo to kick his ass. The fat man noted that Chang is really capable, and his punches are so strong that it is really difficult for ordinary students to resist. But he is sorry that he met him. Another head was surprised when he saw the undefeated golden boy Siluo. The head of the Wangxingzong clan agreed. The invincible kung fu of the golden body of Siluo is unique, and even he is not sure that he can defeat him when he defends with all his might. Siluo growled and used the force. The head thought it was great. As long as they had Siluo, the Wangxingzong clan would be invincible. The protagonist hit the fat man and was surprised that it didn't work and didn't understand if such a technique actually exists. The head and the fat man laughed, and the old man said that his attacks were useless. Immediately, Silua began to shake and he spat out a lot of blood and lost all his health. He fell to the floor and trembled. And the protagonist turned around and asked if he had won, and the judge agreed. The Jade Goddess clan wins the first battle. The head seemed to faint from all this. In the second battle, the Lizong clan will come together against the Xuanjian clan. After that, the protagonist was in the guest bedroom and noted that the watermelons were very heavy and he did not understand how these busty girls survive. Immediately, a girl looked into the protagonist's room and called Zhang. It was Techui who put on tights and asked what he thought of her improved tights. The protagonist blushed and replied that it was very good. Zhang noted that the energy changes there seemed so familiar. He thought of something. Techui said that they had successfully moved forward thanks to his hard work. Tonight he can rest as much as he wants. When she turned around, she saw that the protagonist was missing. After that, they show us the empress's room. The protagonist realized that it had happened again, in the territory of the Lingyang clan. He knew that it would be unpleasant if they found out, so he would have to act, and he blushed. The protagonist came up to her and the girl grabbed him and asked him to hold her tighter. Zhang couldn't help himself and said she could do whatever she wanted. He asked the system to act. Zhang asked why the empress was so dependent on him after she was put under a spell, and he suggested that the divine body could neutralize her pain. The goddess asked for time to stretch. After she agreed, the power of the Jade Goddess cultivated by the empress is an ancient divine art. It is charming. If you are careless, its skills may be lost. In the worst case, its body will be destroyed. The protagonist asked what he could do to help her. Is there any panacea that can be exchanged for points? The goddess replied that if he wanted to save her, it was very simple and he didn't need anything to do it. The divine body contains a lot of yang, and the power of the Jade Goddess contains a lot of yin. If he wants to completely heal the damage caused to her by the power of the Jade Goddess and help her overcome it, there's only one way. He would have to do double cultivation with her, which shocked him. The system asked him if he had made a decision. Only double cultivation could save her. If he hesitated, she might die. The protagonist took the empress in his arms and went forward. He carefully placed her on the bed and the system noted that he had made the right decision. She decided to provide him with technical support. She wanted to say something to him, but the protagonist had already started doing it and the system was surprised and asked what he was doing. Zhang said that although he was not a righteous man, men should not take advantage of others. Since the biggest danger is the golden core, he will fix it. The system was surprised by his words and noted that after that his strength would be exhausted. Once the divine body is exhausted, it will take at least 12 hours to recover. During this time, he won't be able to do anything. So how will he participate in tomorrow's competition? After it was over, Xuanyao woke up and was even surprised that she was still alive. She didn't understand why her damaged golden core had also recovered and assumed that it was the protagonist who helped her again. At that time, Zhang was already behind his room. He asked the system why it didn't mention that the cost of energy depletion is kidney pain. The goddess replied that he deserved it. Such a beautiful woman was sent to his doorstep, but he did not want it and called him an idiot. The protagonist noted that he had done nothing and asked why she was angry. He thought she had some indescribable fetishes and liked to watch others. The goddess replied in denial and assured that she did not have any fetishes. He was talking nonsense and she would ignore him. When he entered the room, he thought that there was definitely something wrong with this system. She was tempted to all kinds of uniforms and she always wanted to drive him into different situations. Ikai was sitting inside his room, who immediately asked where he had been. The protagonist replied that he had a stomachache and went to the toilet. He asked why she was looking for him. The girl got up and went straight to him, saying that he had worked hard today, and thanks to him they had succeeded. She just came to remind him that tomorrow's final would consist of 3 melee matches. They are definitely in the spotlight. He must do everything in his power, but ensuring his own safety is a top priority. The protagonist agreed with her. He was surprised, because Ikai was asking him to fight for the honor of the clan, but reminded him that safety is above all. She immediately asked him to wait a minute. She turned around and asked why his body odor was so familiar. Zhang started to panic and replied that maybe it was the incense used in the bathroom. He also understood that this was bad, because it was the fragrance of the empress. The protagonist tried to move away and stumbled and fell to the floor. She approached him and asked him not to move, because it was so familiar, as if she had felt this smell for 3 long years. She started sniffing him and the protagonist realized that he had to quickly change the subject. The girl began to untangle her ribbon and added that she hoped he could really help her. The protagonist was surprised, because he was just joking, and then the hedgehog blushed. They show us the beautiful Ikai without a bandage again, and Zhang replied that there was no problem with that. After that, the protagonist told her to look up and left, but she didn't see anything. She closed one eye and said she couldn't see anything anyway. The protagonist stood at the sign and realized that she was not blind. She just has high-level myopia. Ikai came closer to the board and began to see something. The protagonist asked the system if it had glasses for Ikai. He will spend a few points to buy them. The goddess clearly replied in denial, but Zhang realized that she was still angry. The feelings of this system are too realistic. The protagonist said that he was very sorry because he was going to cure her eyes first, and then ask her to put on a uniform. Since the goddess said no, she will have to wear it blindfolded, which is a pity, she has such beautiful eyes. Immediately, the system asked him to wait and after a moment gave him the glasses. He understood that even though this system is a woman, it looks like a perverted old man. When he knows what she likes, he can easily negotiate with her. The protagonist said that he was going to put something on her and asked her not to move, and Ikai was surprised. After that, he smiled broadly and asked how she saw. The girl was shocked and blushed from what she saw. She thought it was amazing and did not understand how he did it. Zhang replied with his nose in the air that it was nonsense, because she said that he worked miracles. If she wore them tomorrow, she would definitely catch them off guard. She bowed to him and said that she appreciated it very much. She didn't even know how to thank him. The protagonist asked her if she could do him a favor and she was surprised. He handed her the clothes and asked if she could wear this outfit. Ikai took it and pointed with her finger, saying that it was a very strange style, and asked why she had to wear it. The protagonist came up with the idea that he bought it for his girlfriend and does not know if it will fit her, so he wants to see how it sits on her. They just have the same size. The girl smiled and replied that he should wait a minute. She would change into a suit right now. Some time later, the protagonist sat and thought that now with his eyesight restored, Ikai is a rare weapon. In tomorrow's final, she should be able to destroy the lineup of the opponents. He will spend a few points on some things, which should be enough until his body recovers. Immediately, Ikai said that she was done and the protagonist turned around in anticipation. Ikai appears in front of us in an office suit. She asked if Zhang is sure that they have the same size, because this outfit is too small. The protagonist replied that the costume is not small and looks cute. The system immediately informed him that the body was still in a cooling state. Energy could not be stored. And in order to ensure Zhang's safety, he was being removed and his nose was bleeding. The girl ran to him and asked what was wrong with him. He panicked a lot when she was running towards him and her balls were jumping. Then the girl stepped on an uneven board. She immediately fell right on top of the protagonist and he asked her not to approach. After that, the protagonist sat down on a chair and looked at the girl strangely. The girl really apologizes to him. She tripped and fell. She didn't want to hurt him. She bent down and asked me to ask her. The protagonist replied that everything was fine and the apology was accepted, and also suggested that she discuss tactics for tomorrow. He understood that for some reason his cultivation base had been lost, and he would not be able to recover until tomorrow. So it depends on her and Techui. The girl bent down and apologized. She did not expect that the fall would lead to such consequences. Her shirt tore and the protagonist got very excited and asked her to stop bowing. He decided to put a blindfold over his eyes so as not to see her and said that the final would be between the 3 teams that won today. They will definitely put them first. She and Techui can try to delay time as much as possible. And if they can hold out until he recovers his cultivation base, they will definitely win. She said she would come back and discuss it with Techui. She would do her best and added that this dress was torn. The protagonist replied that it didn't matter. He had a couple more sets. She should just go and find Techui and discuss tactics with her. Ikai agreed and decided to leave. And the protagonist said that they would see each other tomorrow. As she left, she wondered if all men looked like that and noted that he was quite handsome. Immediately, she corrected herself, because she is the one who devoted herself to cultivation, but she had such obscene thoughts. The protagonist was glad that it was finally over. If she hadn't left, he would have bled to death and asked the system to exit. The system congratulated Zhang on completing the 7th task and he will receive a reward for it. The protagonist asked her to wait a minute. Zhang asked if he could exchange this reward for points. The system asked if he was sure, because all the rewards are rare equipment, and points can only be exchanged for common items. The exchange for points is impractical from the point of view of benefits. The protagonist smiled and said that then she could give him more points. Next time he would try to create more advantages and asked what she thought. The girl began to get a little angry and replied that she was not interested in benefits. Rewards could be exchanged for 39.99 points, and if there was no objection, she would transfer them to his account. He had 360 points and also transferred 39.99. The protagonist replied that there were no problems and she could continue. In total, he got 4,359 points. The protagonist said that he was going to trade them for something for tomorrow's competition, and asked if she had any useful weapons. For example, 98 Kelvin, M416, Italian pistols or something like that. The system agreed. It also has sniper rifles, exoskeleton armor and new generation individual nuclear weapons. She asked him if he needed them. The protagonist replied that if she had said earlier, he would have ruled the world with these things a long time ago. The system shouted at him not to even think about it. This is not the era of firearms. She asked if he was crazy or drunk. The protagonist asked if she didn't have it, so why was she shouting so loudly, and what could he trade for? The girl decided to show him and started creating everything. A moment later, a bunch of different weapons from the goddess appeared. Looking at this, Zhang said it wasn't a bad thing. After that, the next day came and the judge said that the finals of the martial arts improvement of the six sects were about to begin. The participating disciples of Lingyun sect, Xuanjian sect, and Jade Goddess sect are invited to the stage. The participating Lingyun sect disciples will be led by Qin, a talent that has never been encountered in thousands of years, known as the Gentleman Lingyuan Sword. He is the favorite to win this year's championship. Xuanjian also sent the strongest members of his clan. The Night Owl claims to be able to chop off the head of an enemy general among thousands of soldiers. He can be described as a bloodthirsty beast. The judge also invited everyone to take a look at the participating disciples of the Jade Goddess sect. But everyone was surprised, because the protagonist was eating at that time and offered the others a snack, which made the girls a little embarrassed. The judge thought they were still having breakfast. Sect Master Chuazjian started laughing loudly and thought that Shang Lan was completely stupid. She was still eating pancakes at this time. Another head asked Linson not to forget how 3 of her students were defeated by her punch yesterday. You should never underestimate an opponent. Another head said that the Jade Goddess sect should never be allowed to show off again. If this gets out, none of their 5 clans will be able to show up publicly. The third one asked him not to worry, because this is the end of their luck. The empress understood that the Linyuan and Xuanjian clans would definitely join forces to attack Shang Lan and the others. But she did not understand why Shang Lan was so calm and whether he had any plan. A judge appeared above the ring and said that this final was a 3-way melee involving 9 people. And there are no other restrictions except that no one's life could be harmed. Those who surrender or lose consciousness are considered eliminated, and the last clan left on the field is the final winner. He asked, they figured it out, and everyone unanimously agreed with the judge. He added that there are 90 minutes until the end and the final begins. The Xuanjian clan ran forward and Kaizai told his brothers to go ahead. The protagonist began to shout that the girls had already turned around. Kai realized that something was wrong again. Techui asked what was the matter. The protagonist explained that he can only strike 3 times a day, but today they have 6 enemies. He didn't know which of them would get in their way first. The Xuanjian clan realized that such a terrifying strike could only be used 3 times a day. Although they had discussed victory tactics with the Lingyun clan last night, but since he could only strike 3 times, Kai wondered why they should attack first and smiled maliciously. Qin Yun was angry, and Hu Wang shouted that Kaizai was a bastard and chickened out. Ken asked if he wanted to force them to make the first move. If the enemy didn't move, they would too. It had already been 30 minutes, but no one moved and everyone did not understand why everyone was standing and thought that they might be looking for the enemy's weaknesses. Linson got very angry and asked what they were doing. They should go ahead and fight. Wudong noted that the clan master was angry and asked what to do. Kaizai replied that so that he wouldn't worry about him, they needed to see what the Lingyun clan would do. Wait a bit, if they go first, they'll end up badly. The protagonist was lying on the floor and thinking that there was still an hour left until 12 o'clock. If he could be pulled, then they would definitely be the winners. Immediately, Ikai shouted for them to be careful and the protagonist got up. Ikai dodged, and Techui began to maneuver the daggers with her hammer. Well, Zhang was shocked. The audience was glad that they had finally started moving. Qin said that he suddenly felt that it would be too boring if everything went on like this and they could warm up. The judge said that it was Qin who finally made his move. Techui assumed that he was provoking them, and the protagonist realized that he had seen through his bluff. If only he could really use the punch 3 more times. He had to stand in front and prepare to meet the enemy. He realized that the battle was finally about to begin. Kaizai asked Qin if he had really taken the first step. Wudong asked if they should make a move too. Kai told him to take his time and let them fight. They would wait for an opportunity before making a move. He has never served anyone. Qin, Hu Wang and Zhao Liang ran forward. Qin said not to wait for them, they're on their own. The 2 ran forward, and Hu Wang jumped and was right above them, and Ikai immediately thought that this was not good. Qin noted that he thought it was a bluff and ordered Hu Wang to kill her. He grabbed 2 axes and swung them and said to leave it to him. The protagonist looked at me with serious eyes. The empress also tensed up and said the protagonist's name in her head. Hu Wang stepped on a trap. The protagonist only managed to say goodbye to him, and he was surprised. Immediately, he flew back and started screaming. People realized that Hu Wang had been thrown out, and the guy was surprised by how the traps ended up in the arena. The other clan heads were angry and asked if there was some kind of agreement this year and why he didn't tell them. The blonde panicked and replied that he had just found out too, and assured that they had not set any traps. Otherwise, how could the disciples of their sect step on them first? The clan masters think that all this is for a reason. They thought Shang Lan did it, but he thought it cost him 30 points. Zhao Liang shouted that the protagonist was shameless and set traps. Techui slapped him on the back and said that with his virtue, he still has the courage to judge others. Ichai used her techniques on Ken and he had to ask Kaizai if he was still busy. Immediately, Ikai's ears started to hurt. The night owl began to emit sound waves, and Kaizai and Wudong ran forward saying that this Shang Lan was very evil. First you need to kill the blind woman, and then deal with the short-legged girl. From his words, the flow began to get angry. Kai and Wu ran to Ikai and he said that she was as resilient as he was. Immediately, she let her strength into them and they flew back. Ikai put on her glasses and became sighted. The protagonist said that she beat them up. The hour of victory weighed directly on their side. Kai's eye was injured and didn't know if she was really seeing. Immediately, Ikai began to beat Kai and Wu quickly with her feet. Ken shouted at him to beware of her traps and Zhao Liang understood him. He took off his clothes. His muscles increased in size and he began to laugh. He was running very fast forward. Immediately traps appeared out of the ground and he was surprised. The bamboo sticks hit his body and broke. He started laughing and said that these bamboo poles could only tickle him and asked what else he had. Immediately, another iron stick appeared, which hit him right in the face. Kin was surprised with this sound. Zhao was in a lot of pain and he thought it was an iron bamboo. It hit him in the face and knocked out all his teeth. The protagonist noted that there were 2 more left. Kin started to get angry and shouted whether he would finish at all or not and threw the daggers. The protagonist immediately took out a shield and defended himself from the daggers. Kin was surprised that the shield was so big and did not understand where he got it from. The protagonist pulled his arm out of the shield and threw something. It was a callista with bolts. The protagonist noted that he himself wanted to fight with a hidden weapon and smiled maliciously. Kin started running away and shouted that it wasn't a concealed weapon at all. Night Owl struck with his spear and smashed the protagonist's weapon. Techui noted that this guy had made his move. Owl said Zhang used so many tricks, but why would he slow down? After all, he doesn't have the opportunity to use yesterday's 3-punch technique. He asked if he was right. The protagonist realized that he was not so stupid. He secretly observed his shortcomings. The empress understood that Shang Lan could no longer attack, but she did not know why. Night Owl noted that it was not difficult to dodge Kenyon's knives, but he decided to hide behind a shield. It can be seen that not only can he not use his technique, he cannot use even the simplest movements. He added that it was time to put an end to this farce. The system reported that the cooling has been completed and the divine body can be charged and used. The protagonist was happy with this information because his fists are already itching.